A very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for joining Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa, where we discuss pertinent issues of peace and sustainability around the world and across Africa. Our theme today is From Humiliation to Dignity. We cannot afford more setbacks. Our speaker is Dr. Evelin Lindner. Evelin is a medical doctor and a clinical psychologist. Has conducted research on war and genocide in Somalia or on Somalia and Rwanda, and published on dignity and humiliation. I'm honored to welcome you back, Evelin, to Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa. And I welcome everybody here on board today. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Evelin Lindner. And now, Evelin, you are welcome to share your screen and begin your presentation. We are all ears, and should I say eyes, to listen to you. Thank you.
I have to say thank you. I'm so honored that you invited me. And I will now share my screen and start. And I hope, please, I have a very long presentation. I apologize. So we might not get through all of it. So if anybody starts fainting in the middle of it, please let me know and say, please stop, Evelyn, make a pause, because I'm always so enthusiastic, I forget making pauses. So please, I depend on you that you are saving us all from me. So I would like to start with thanking for the kind invitation extended to me by Dr. George Mutalemwa to this wonderful series of weekly academic and professional discussions on peace education, peace research, and peace activism, as well as on the question of sustainable development. And this series is titled Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa. And since not everyone knows our dear host, he is a senior lecturer in development studies and served as the head of the Department of Sociology at the St. Augustine University of Tanzania, and many other things. It would take all the hour if I were to make all the list. So, but at last, since here are also people from Germany, he is a senior fellow of the African Good Governance Network, founded by the German Academic Exchange Service, DAAD. So George is a DAAD alumnus. So George, we are so happy about your initiative and that you invite people every week. That is such a gift to humanity. And here I would like to share with everyone how we met George. Who brought me to you? This was our beloved Howard Richards. And I think many of you know Howard Richards. He was one of the pillars, and his thinking remains a pillar of our global dignity work. He was a peace philosopher. So we send our loving thoughts to Howard and hope he will hear us from wherever he is now. And I would like to share with you all first, who am I? Here is my father. Before the Second World War, a proud heir of a farm. He was born there in the middle of Europe, and then came the war. When he was 17 years old, 1945, everything in Europe, the big cities look like that. This is after the Second World War. Here I'm born, okay? And you see my father, he has lost one arm, he has lost two brothers, he has lost his farm, he has lost his homeland, he is a deeply traumatized, displaced, and deported person who is unwelcome where he is now. So his identity is, I have no home, There is no home for me to go back to. So this is the situation into which I was born, into a displaced, deeply traumatized family. And I took care of my dear father the last 3 years of his life until he passed away at the age of 96. And basically, he is the reason for, or the motivation behind my work. It's my beloved father. And, I told him, your life of suffering was not in vain, because my work is your arm, the arm you lost in the war. My next book is supposed to be titled A Letter to My Father, and this is the cover of the book, that my work is his arm. So in order to do this work, I live globally since 50 years. I'm embedded on all continents to see what we as humanity can do. Can we do never again war, never again mass destruction, mass killing, never again suicide, genocide? Can we do that? So that is my life project. And I wrote my doctoral dissertation in social psychology, as you said, George, about the psychology of humiliation in relation to war and genocide, with case studies Somalia and Rwanda on the background of Nazi Germany. Here we are in Kigali, here we are in Hargeisa. And now I want to read what I learned in Africa, okay? Can I do that? Please don't read it, I read it for you. What I heard from many intellectuals who saw me with white skin: first you colonize us, then you leave us with a so-called democratic state that is alien to us. After that, you watch us getting dictatorial leaders. Then you give them weapons to kill half of us. Finally, you come along to measure our suffering and claim that this will help us. Are you crazy? I came to study genocide in Rwanda. They said, are you crazy? You want to measure our suffering after you brought it? You Westerners get a kick out of our problems. You have everything back home. You live in luxury, and you are blind to that. You think you are suffering when you can't take a shower or have to wait for the bus for more than 2 hours. Your four-wheel drive cars cover our people with dust. You enjoy being a king in our country. Why are you just average at home? All you want is to have fun, to get a good salary, write empty reports to your organization back home, or publish some articles, or get a doctorate like me, so you can continue this fraud. You are a hypocrite. You know that we need help. How glad we would be not to need it. It would be great if you would really listen to us once, not just to the greedy ones among us who exploit your arrogant stupidity for their own good. We feel deeply humiliated by your arrogant and self-congratulating help. You help us come along, build wells or some other installations or services liable to be ecologically unsound or unmanageable in the longer run. You create a few short-term jobs for chauffeurs, secretaries, and security personnel, and then you disappear again. So I share this, what I heard in Africa. Why? Why do I share this? Because I want to show you that I'm not an arrogant European, Western, white person who has no idea about Africa. So this is why I read that to you. So I know, and my own family background has prepared me for being the humiliated. I'm coming from humiliation. So, and I have studied the world for 50 years now. And what is, from my point of view, the state of our world now? Where do we stand? And let me start with all the positive news. May I? Are you still alive? Georg, are you still with us?
Yes.
Yeah, we are with you.
Georg is always looking at somebody else. Georg, look into the camera. Otherwise, I'm always looking at you, looking at other things. So I want to come to you with a daring proposition. If we consider all of human history, then the co-creation of worldwide peace in dignity has never been as possible as now. Isn't that something? Never as possible as now. And why? Humanity is perhaps not capable of using this opportunity. I hear the voices. They say, are you crazy, Evelyn? We have the best opportunity now. I admit that pessimism is warranted. Yet pessimism ought not make us blind for the opportunity. And what is not new? What is new? Unprecedented experiences and knowledge open this window of opportunity, and it might not stay open for long. Therefore, we cannot afford more setbacks. So, what is the first new thing? New experience number one, the overview effect. None of our forebears could see the planet from outside. This is an extremely important perspective change. If you were born in one city, moved to another, and looked back on your birthplace, you saw it in a different light. The fact that we can see the planet from outside is extremely important. We have the overview effect. We can understand this is one tiny planet without borders in a huge universe. The next experience that is new, nuclear war, extreme weather events. We understand that competition for domination is ultimately suicidal. My friends in Norway often said, oh, global warming is good for us, then we can cultivate wine. But now there are extreme weather events. For the first time, we as humanity can get all life on Earth be extinct. For the first time, none of our forebears could do that. Okay, here we are. You see that is Johan Rockström's image. He is a climate researcher, one of the most famous in the world. And you look 400,000 years back here, and you see the green line is the climate space where we can live. And now you see on the right side where we are. We are at the upper limit of the safe space where we can live. And we are here, you see in the middle, where we are now. If we continue with business as usual, we will enter unsafe space. We have to turn around. You see the green lines is the turnaround to a planetary civilization thriving in a safe operating space. You know, and this is also new that we know that. Our ancestors did not know that. So we have more knowledge about our world than ever before. And I asked artificial intelligence to make this picture for that. More knowledge. We have everything. We have everything needed to build a decent future. Then the next thing, research indicates that human nature is relational, not belligerent. Many people say, Evelyn, you are crazy. You know, human nature is to make war. You can never change human nature. No, human nature is relational. It is not inherently belligerent. Some new opportunity number 5. Global interconnectedness opens space for people-to-people diplomacy as never before. Our ancestors could not simply get on internet and make friends with people on other continents. We have everything so that everyone can contribute to building global trust. Just imagine, remember Germany and France? They were once arch enemies. They are no longer arch enemies. This is what we need worldwide. Please work for that. New values. We are very fortunate that a small group of people used the unique window of opportunity, which stood open after World War II, to say that all human beings are equal in dignity. We are extremely fortunate. You see there Eleanor Roosevelt, 1948, when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. Perhaps if she were now there and we would try to do that now, it might not work now. It was a unique window of opportunity after the Second World War. And what she did was manifesting what Margaret Mead said. Margaret Mead once said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So this is a message to all of us. We are a small group, but never doubt that a small group can change the world. Window of opportunity that we have now. We still have regions on the planet not engulfed by violence and war. Not all of us have to run from the next bomb. Complete environmental degradation has not engulfed all of us yet. We still have regions that are not yet trapped in the tyranny of emergency. When you have to run from the next earthquake or the next bomb, you cannot think clearly. And here we are people from Europe, we are people from parts of the world where we can still think clearly. And this opportunity may not be available for future generations. So we have to use it now. No more setbacks now, therefore. Now I talk to you as learners, because in times of change, the learners inherit the world, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. I think this is where we stand now. So I invite all of us, me included, to really embrace that we are all learners. So now my big question to all of you, if we have so many good news, we know so many things, we have all the knowledge to make a better world, how come that we don't do it? What stands in the way? What stands in the way of global peace and dignity among us and with nature, of which we are only a small part? What stands in the way? The first thing that stands in the way is something that most of us don't think about. And therefore, I would like to invite you to sit back, drink a bit of coffee or tea or water, and then go with me into the past. I invite you now to step back and look at our planet from distance. Because what stands in the way are originally well-intended historical adaptations. And here I base myself on anthropologist Bill Urey, who described a simplified history of us modern human beings, modern Homo sapiens. We walk this planet only since about 300,000 years, very short time. The dinosaurs were here for millions of years. We started in Africa. From there, we populated our planet. We lived in very small groups, and we followed the wild food. It was a win-win situation. We could always go to the next valley. And if the planet were larger, we would still do that. And you see the lying 8 there, you see that? And that is the symbol for unity in diversity, for equality in dignity, in mutual solidarity. It's the infinity symbol. It's also the Möbius strip. It is the symbol for non-dualism in philosophy. So I use this symbol to describe how equal dignity in mutual solidarity, in dialogue, it's my symbol for that. And people before, in the first 97% of our history, of our modern human history, they lived in that way. Small groups, quite egalitarian. They might have conflicts, but they didn't have systematic war. Okay, then comes the first turning point. It's, 11,700 years, there was a climate change. The last ice age was ending. And also, our ancestors had populated for the first time all continents. The end of the first round of globalization, as I call it. And circumscription kicked in. This is an anthropological term for limitation. Suddenly, other people were already occupying the next valley. Some people started to stay where they were. They got more resources out of the soil under their feet. Complex agriculture started, sedentary lifestyle. The last 3% of our history is very different to the first 97%. As soon as you plant something on your territory and you want to harvest it in autumn, it is a win-lose situation. It's my land or your land. You get some weapons to defend yourself if you are afraid that your neighbors might come and steal. And the neighbors get afraid of you, and you get into an arms race and automatically into war. This is what we have the last 3% of our human history, modern human history. Here we see how complex agriculture arose in a rather short time, short historically seen. Of course, it took thousands of years, but it started in many places on this our globe almost at the same time. Okay, of course, this is very simplified said. So I say it simplified. So what arose in that context? The security dilemma. We have to amass weapons, said people who are afraid of their neighbors, because we are scared of our neighbors. When we amass weapons, you get scared, the neighbors get scared. You amass weapons, the neighbors also, and we get more scared. The motto is, if you want peace, prepare for war. That is the motto of the security dilemma. And what is the result? Why is it called a dilemma? Because you want peace, but what you create is war. It's almost always war, the last 3% of our modern history. Almost everywhere on the globe, war, only interrupted by ceasefires. And the map you see here is from 1648 in Europe, after 30 years of war, where half of the population was killed. And you see everyone pitted against the other. And I wrote my book on honor and humiliation and terror in 2017. And there I said, violence, hatred, and terror in that context are deeply entangled with honor, heroism, glory, loyalty, and love, as long as the world is fragmented and the security dilemma is strong. Why? Because when I love my own people, the more I need to hate our enemies. So many people say, oh, in this world, we need more love, empathy. Yeah, if I have more love and empathy for my own people, then I'm called on to hate our enemies more. So as long as the world is fragmented, more love and more empathy might bring more hatred. This is the security dilemma. And as long as we are caught in that, we continue war. And what emerged in that context of a strong security dilemma? What emerged was what scholar Riane Eisler calls the dominator model of society, with an alpha male at the top and young men being trained to regard it as honorable to guard the borders against enemies coming from outside, and women being taught to stay safely inside and raise the next generation. Humiliation was used to keep underlings down and enemies out in that context. And I asked artificial intelligence to make an image of that. You see that? The strong men at the top, the young men at the borders, and the women inside. And we see it in Ukraine now. The men have to fight. They are not allowed to leave the country, but the women have to bring the children into safety. That is the dominator model of society. And we have it through the past 3% of our history, last 10,000 years, 5,000 years, we have it almost everywhere. The samurai in Japan, the Aztecs, it's not a European thing. So let me introduce another model to you, because that is very, very good to show us also the way into the future. And this is anthropologist Alan Page Fisker's relational models theory. He has studied many community societies around the world, and he found that we can collaborate in basically 4 ways. 4 ways, okay? Communal sharing. Communal sharing is the first one. What I do in a good family. I give what I have, I get what I need. I don't calculate. There is love and empathy. It's the biggest, the most comprehensive way of collaborating. The second, authority ranking. It means a difference. It could be the good parent, but it can also be the toxic tyrant. And then we have equality matching. Exchange. I give you this, you give me that. Here I start calculating. And then we have market pricing. You exchange for paper. You calculate from a 0 point. So it's the most narrow and most quantitative. So you start with the most qualitative, and at the bottom is the most quantitative. And in the past, you know, in the first 97% of our history, we had the first, you know, communal sharing. Our ancestors were living in small groups that did communal sharing, and they manifested the positive version of authority ranking. We still know it from indigenous groups today. They do that still. You know, they respect their elders. They have good elders rather than toxic dictators. So this is what our ancestors manifested throughout the first 97% of our history, if we say it simplified. Equality matching, exchange was not yet much there, and market pricing was not at all there. This is our history. This is where we come from. And what happened about 10,000 years ago? What happened there? What was this first turning point? Communal sharing was minimized, and the toxic version of authority ranking was highlighted, namely the tyrant, the hierarchy, the tyranny, the hierarchy, stark hierarchy. So to say it in a different way, from a partnership mindset to a dominator mindset. That happened about 10,000 years ago because our ancestors had to adapt to what anthropologists call limitation, circumscription. Basically, the planet had become full. We had populated all of it. As I said, if the planet were larger, we would still follow the wild food. But then the planet is limited in size, and our ancestors were somehow hit by that fact, and they adapted. And they adapted in a way that brought war and the dominator mindset and exploitation. This was their adaptation, and they were well intended, and many people are still proud of it. We call it civilizations that emerged in the past 10,000 years. However, in the long run, it is not a feasible solution. And we have to rethink now what our ancestors did 10,000 years ago. So in the last 3% within of our history, within this dominator model of society, humiliation was seen as a pro-social tool of masters to keep underlings down and enemies out. So what is humiliation? And this is my field of study. Humiliation is a very complex thing. It is a relational act. I feel humiliated. I humiliate you. An emotional state. I feel humiliated. And it can be also a systemic social mechanism like apartheid. The term humiliation has roots in the Latin word humus, or earth. It has a downward movement at its core. Degradation, Nedverdigelse in Norwegian, Erniedrigung in German, abaissement in French. Competition for domination over social and ecological resources became a proud and glorious path to victory. This is an artificial intelligence image of a knight in shining armor. Humiliation of honor was followed by violent revenge, going to duel, for example. And this was for men in power. while women and lowly men were expected to support their leaders in dutiful humbleness. Aristocrats could go to duel, but the beaten wife could not go to duel against her master. The slave could not go to duel against his master. In that time, in that period, the belief arose that human nature is belligerent. Here we see historian Wayne Lee, former visiting chair of strategic studies at the US Air Force School. He published an article in the Quarterly Journal of Military History, and his message is, war is inevitable due to human nature, and the best we can do is to be prepared. So you see that belief arose in the last 3% of our history. And it's a misguided belief that keeps war going. So my question to you now, given that our ancestors for the first 97% of our history manifested equal worthiness and mutual solidarity in small groups, how come did our, in the last 3% of our history, did people forget about that? Did they forget about that? And did they adapt to this hierarchy? No, it was not forgotten. It was not forgotten. Resistance movements arose. However, throughout the last 3% of our history, these movements replicated the dominator society, wittingly or not, or they were rolled back by it. This is what happened, and this is what we cannot have now again. Let me share with you one big emancipation time. This is an AI image of what? An AI image of, and I read it to you, don't read it, it's a long text. The axial age is a term that philosopher Karl Jaspers coined for the philosophical, religious, and technical developments that arose in relatively independent cultural regions around the world in a comparatively short period of time, starting 800 years before our common era, before Christ, and lasting until around 200 years before Christ, even though, this assumption could not stand up to subsequent historical scrutiny in exactly the way Jaspers said it, but still today it can serve to overcome Eurocentric views of history. So therefore I share it with you. This period saw Confucius and Lao Tzu in China, the Brahmins in late Vedic India, Buddha's teachings in India, Israel's biblical prophets, Zoroaster in Iran, the Celts in Europe, as well as the epic poems Iliad and Odyssey in Greece, with natural philosophers Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes, followed by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Women often had more freedom and influence in these contexts. All these movements often cross-fertilized each other. For instance, important parallels existed between Buddhism and classical Greek philosophy. Indeed, Greek sculptures gave Buddha his human face. You see, a big emancipation movements. And you see, they were all rolled back into hierarchy. Look just at the message of Jesus. It was a very egalitarian message. How come that the Catholic Church is so hierarchical? It doesn't go together. You see, the moment these movements institutionalized, and that is a very important lesson for today, the moment they institutionalized, they were brought back into the hierarchy. And they betrayed their original message. But we have more in the world now. Peace among us, social sustainability, peace with our ecosphere, ecological sustainability. We still have seeds around of these emancipation mindsets. And here in Africa, we have Ubuntu. you know, all Ubuntu. In Norway, we have likeverdsidealet and dugnadsånd. In Hawaii, we have ho'oponopono. Many, many, many indigenous populations still know all that. They know how to be in dialogue with nature. We have notions like the common land. We have in German, the Allmende. In Norwegian, Almenningen. Then Beni Communi. You know, all this is more than natural reserves. It's more than fair trade. And, you know, Ubuntu is more than democracy, much more than democracy. So we have many, many, many seeds for emancipation movements here around in the world that have survived. But as I said, we as humanity, we always took one step forward and two steps back in the past, and we can no longer afford this. Systemic humiliation in local contexts can only be diminished. This is what I conclude. If the security dilemma is overcome through global cooperation, as this dilemma drives division and the dominator mindset. So what do we have to do? What is our task? It's overcoming this security dilemma, overcoming the motto, if you want peace, prepare for war, or war for peace, or peace through military security, through armed peace. We have to overcome the notion of armed peace and manifest that we are one small, tiny human family on a tiny planet in a vast universe. We have to manifest what Gandhi said. If you want peace, prepare for peace. Human security through peace. Gandhi said, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. So we have to go from dominator polities pitted against each other to global partnership. This is the task at hand. And imagine, after the First World War, our grandfathers and grandmothers thought of it. In 1920, the League of Nations was established as the first worldwide intergovernmental organization with a singular mission to maintain world peace. League of Nations. And even more, a few months before the US officially entered the Second World War, American and British goals for the world after the war were formulated in the so-called Atlantic Charter. This is 1941. Listen what the promise was then. It included the promise of the self-determination of people. The people of India, Burma, Malaya, and Indonesia and Africa hoped that this promise would extend also to the Pacific and to Asia in general, into Africa. In other words, that global self-determination would mean the end of empire, the end of colonies. This is what people thought all over the world in 1948. 41. However, by war's end, and there we see the step back again. By war's end, the Allies reneged on this promise and followed Winston Churchill's clarification that this promise applied only to Hitler's empire, not to empire in general, and certainly not to the British Empire. Moyne calls the Human Rights Declaration of 1948 a consolation prize. It's the step back. So here we had the Atlantic Charter. It envisioned a world free from fear and want, where nations could live safely within their boundaries with freedom of the seas, disarmament of aggressor nations, and a commitment to renounce the use of force. 1941. Then, 45, the United Nations came into being with the aspiration to avoid future wars through diplomacy and dialogue among nations. What a promise. Then, 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And many people say to me, Evelyn, these are Western thoughts, Western ideals. We don't want them. You know, here Eleanor Roosevelt worked together and drafted the declaration together with many people from all over the world. And let me introduce one of these people, namely the mother of this woman who you see. The mother of this woman, a Pakistani woman, she was part of Eleanor Roosevelt's committee, and she brought that all human beings are born equal, free and equal. Eleanor Roosevelt wanted all men are born equal. She said all humans are born equal. And who is this woman here? She is the wife of Prince Hassan, El Hassan bin Talal of Jordan, who invited us to have our dignity conference in Amman in 2022. So here we see that the Human Rights Declaration was not a Western imposition. What is the core sentence of the human rights ideal? All human beings, not all men, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And this is a revolutionary sentence. In the past, it would have been all human beings are born unequal in worthiness and rights, and some are freer than others. This would have been the sentence before. So it's a revolutionary sentence. It's a turnaround. So here I show this turnaround in a different way. Okay, so the first 97% of our history, we lived in small groups. We manifested equal worthiness in mutual solidarity. Then came the first turning point, okay? Our ancestors erected a hierarchy. Masters used humiliation as a pro-social tool to keep underlings down and enemies out. And then comes this revolutionary sentence that all human beings are equal in dignity and rights. This is the dismantling of this hierarchy again. It's the building down. It is as if humankind turned around towards the last 10,000 years and said, what we did there is now illegitimate. We can no longer have masters and slaves. We can no longer have that. We want to go back to what we had in the first 97% of our history. And we want to together go into a new future, a future of equal dignity, mutual solidarity, and dignified humility. Mandela was born in the lower left corner as an underling in South Africa. He went to the white elite in South Africa and said, no longer can you arrogate superiority. Times have changed. It's no longer legitimate what you do. Please come down. Humble yourself. Do not cry humiliation. Humble yourself. And Mandela went to his black brothers and sisters and said, no longer do you have to accept being down. It's not nature's order or God's will that you are down in the hierarchy. You don't have to engage in subservient humbleness any longer. You are entitled to feel that your dignity is humiliated. You are entitled to rise up. But, and I will come back to that, empowering can go too far. Mandela did something different from what happened in Rwanda. In Rwanda, the Hutu, the servants, Hutu means servant, rose up and they were empowered too far, you could say, and they tried to kill their former humiliators. In Mandela, if he had said to his black brothers and sisters in South Africa, take your knives and go to your white neighbors and kill them all, who knows, perhaps they would have done it. But he didn't do that. So he invited all of us into a new future together. And this is what I worked for. So we are at the second main transformative moment in our history as modern humans. And it starts, this turnaround that we are in now, starts about 1757 in regarding the terminology of humiliation. The first time that to humiliate was defined as the violation of the dignity of someone in the English language was 1757. in the Oxford Encyclopedia. So for the first time, to humiliate what was antisocial, no longer pro-social. 1757. Then 1776, American Declaration of Independence, 1789, French Revolution, and so on and so on. And then the 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was not very known there. It didn't have much impact. It got its impact in the 1970s when these 1968 student movements arose. They embraced these ideals more fully. And the anti-apartheid campaign led by African and Asian nations is often hailed as the earliest sustained international human rights struggle alongside decolonization. Human rights were embraced as a fundamental goal of the struggle for racial justice. So what happened? It's not just decolonization. It's not just apartheid, anti-apartheid struggle. It's everywhere. This transition affects all parts of all of our lives. Just think of the terminology of child abuse. It did not exist in the past. In the past, breaking the will of the child was good pedagogy. Think of the term domestic violence. It did not exist before. It was domestic chastisement, the duty of the man in the house to chastise disobedient wives and children. Female genital mutilation was the customary duty, honor killing, customary duty, not a crime. Apartheid was simply regarded as a solution, segregation. Colonialism was glorious empire building. Racism, sexism, rankism, know your lowly place before. War, genocide, torture, killing and maiming was seen as solution. Remember Hitler's term Endlösung, the final solution. Holocaust, killing as solution. So the first important task at hand for us now, the dominator mindset that has been learned throughout the past 3% of modern history, needs to be unlearned, and that fast, without rollback. The second important task is to become more aware that human rights ideals, while they bring joy to many people, also bring unforeseen problems. I think that especially human rights defenders overlook that. Feelings of humiliation become more intense and violence may increase because the right to resistance is now democratized. Why? Remember the hierarchical model of society. Imagine you are born into that. If you are pushed down a bit, it is not so hurtful because you are staying inside your group. Only if you are exiled or killed, you will be out. However, the moment you are in a context where you believe that you should be treated with equality as equal in dignity, and you are pushed down, you're immediately outside of the human family. It hits you at the core of your personality immediately. So therefore, dignity humiliation, or the humiliation of dignity, hurts so much deeper than the humiliation of honor. So therefore, it becomes more intense. And therefore, if you then get angry, as in Rwanda, you can turn to violence. And this risk is higher now through human rights ideals. This is counterintuitive, and therefore it needs to be understood. And research from 2014 shows that humiliation, and I would suggest that this is particularly valid for dignity humiliation, is the most intense human emotion. It leads to the mobilization of more processing power and a greater consumption of mental resources than any other emotion. Imagine. So in the past, when you imagine you are born into a hierarchical system, and you think that being humiliated is even good for you, you know, the beaten wife says, "Oh, my husband loves me, therefore he beats me." You say, "Oh, or it's God's will that I'm down." You know, then the society is quiet. But now human rights ideals have arisen, have come, and more people embrace it, and then you don't accept it to be beaten or to be down, to be pushed down. You don't accept it anymore. And what does happen? It's the democratization of the right to revenge, to pay back with acts of humiliation. We have school shootings, terror attacks, violent uprisings, rebellions, war, and genocide. All this worsened by humiliation entrepreneurship. Millions of people, like, for example, look at the Dalits in India. They accepted being down in society before. Now they learn that it's not acceptable. Millions of people rise up. Millions. And what if they all get very angry and violent? So what is the solution? The solution is the Mandela path. Yes, to be pushed down, nobody needs to accept that. Yes, anger is extremely important, extremely important. But it should be channeled not in violence, into violence, but into what Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator, called conscientization, constructive solutions, Gandhi, Mandela, Ambedkar. So now I'm coming to the end of this chapter, and I will read my conclusion, but I read it. Don't read it because it's too long a text, okay? I read it to you. Human rights ideals represent an invitation and a promise. Two things, invitation and a promise. They invite all human beings to consider themselves as members of one single human family, where all, and this is the promise, join hands in a spirit of mutual solidarity and are promised equality and dignity. Dalits and Sami in Norway, they are the Sami, many indigenous peoples, and all those who share their experiences, all the downtrodden in the world, now feel deeply hurt by being held down, and they refuse such treatment, and I refuse such treatment. In other words, wherever and whenever human rights ideals become salient, the perspective of humiliation becomes a much more important lens to look at everything from depression, domestic violence, loss of global trust, to war and genocide. This is why it is much more important to study humiliation today than it was in the past. In the interconnected world in which we live, where knowledge about the ideal of equal dignity for all is out and about, I consider dynamics of humiliation to be the most important obstacle to a dignified future for humankind. In my work, I say yes to empowerment and agency of the downtrodden in principle, yet I prefer to speak of entrustment. So I don't use the word empowerment, but entrustment, and this has two reasons. Power elites tend to see the invitation and the promise entailed in the ideals of equal dignity for all in mutual solidarity. They see it as a threat, as an attack on their honor. Those who have power are likely to resist the loss of their privileges they believe they have rightfully earned. As a result, they are convinced that they are the ones being humiliated and will seek ways to undermine both the invitation and the promise of human rights ideals. They too will seek empowerment and agency, and since they have access to much more resources than disadvantaged groups, they will increase oppression. A severe backlash against human rights ideals will be the outcome. The result will be cycles of humiliation leading to ever deeper polarization. Indeed, this is what we see today all over the world. I speak of entrustment rather than of empowerment, also because empowerment of the downtrodden can go too far. The social worker who empowers a beaten wife to leave her violent husband, for instance, ought not to empower the wife to kill her husband or to humiliate him back. Or the self-esteem movement in the United States produced narcissism. We remember Jane Twenge's book of 2014, Generation Me. This overshoot of empowerment is dangerous, and it is intensified when learning about human rights ideals creates also shame, as this may lead to violence, even genocide. I have had clients as I'm a social psychologist, but also a clinical psychologist. I worked as a psychotherapist for many years, and a beaten wife who learns that this is not right to be beaten, she suddenly gets ashamed that she accepted it in the past. And her shame weakens her from inside so that she cannot leave her husband because she is so ashamed. So shame, feeling shame about, having accepted humiliation in the past, this is a trauma that we have to, a secondary trauma we have to avoid. And I saw that in Rwanda. And I can say more about it, how I saw it in Rwanda in the genocide later if we want to speak about it more. So at the moment, we live in times of sociocide, ecocide, and cogitocide. Why? Because the dominator mindset lives on. To have, to own, to possess, to control, to exploit, instead of to be in mutual solidarity. This is unfortunately still living on. What is ecocide? It's the wearing down of our ecosphere. Here, COP29, energy transition must not trigger a stampede of greed that crushes the poor. That is the danger we are facing now. I call it the security dilemma number 2, when people adapt the motto of security dilemma number 1. Remember the security dilemma number 1, the motto is, if you want peace, prepare for war. Now I meet more and more people who say, if you want material riches, invest in exploitation. And here you see we had our 2019 Dignity Conference in the Amazon. This is a picture from the air where you see the exploitation. And this pits the proverbial 1% against the 99%. It is a new way of creating a dominator reality. I wrote a book in 2012 titled A Dignity Economy, where I walked through some of the detrimental effects that flow from present-day economic arrangements. They create artificial scarcity and environmental degradation. They breed ubiquitous mistrust. They promote abuse as a legitimate strategy. They foster fear that debilitates rather than alerting. They produce false choices, and they cause psychological damage. This is what we are living in now. And if we use the model that Alan Page Fiske gave us, then we live in the dominator mindset on steroids now. We have still the authority ranking, the hierarchies. We have extreme inequality in our world today. And then we have market pricing. What does market pricing mean for us now? What it means is what is profitable is being done, whether it is good or bad, while the good that would need to be done is not done when it is not profitable. As a net result, little of what is good is being done and too much of what is bad. This is the trap we as humanity have built for ourselves, and we are stuck in it. So we have sociocide. It is the killing of our sociosphere. Side comes from Latin caedo, act of killing. We know suicide, genocide. We see a rise in aggressiveness and hatred all over the world. Incels, school shooters, all isms have failed their promise of well-being for all. Communism, capitalism, all created hierarchies. Humiliation entrepreneurs, like Hitler used that, surfing on the feelings of humiliation in populations, bundling their feelings in a national narrative of humiliation, saying, we have been humiliated, all of us, and now we have to fight back. This is a false emancipation movement. It replaces old tyranny with new tyranny rather than dismantling it. You know that Hitler was welcomed as a messiah in the beginning. And what was the outcome? It was a false emancipation movement. We have a loneliness epidemic now. We have the rise and abuse of children. Animals are living creatures like us. Wars are sociocide at a global scale that compounds ecocide. The United Nations devolve into disunited nations now. And all this is facilitated by cogitocide, the wearing down of our cogitosphere, the realm of thinking and reflection. We are drowning in a sightless infosphere, and thus we facilitate sociocide and ecocide. And you remember Prince El Hassan bin Talal? He is a Mandela personality. He invited us to have our 22 Dignity Conference in Amman, and he gave this terminology to me. He said, Evelyn, you have to add that cogitocide to ecocide and sociocide, because that is what's facilitating it. So the second important task that we have is to become aware that wherever human rights ideals become salient, feelings of humiliation become more relevant than before, and the right to violent revenge is democratized. The sense of ontological security, the sense of stability and continuity of people in their existence and experiences is increasingly impacted by cycles of humiliation. Environmental degradation makes business as usual obsolete. However, this may be perceived as humiliating by some people, particularly when past achievements lose their value. Rather than mitigating these dynamics, economic incentives offer to humiliation entrepreneurship a path to profit and power. We see it now in the United States, where I'm just now these days, humiliation entrepreneurship is a path to profit and power. And all this happens while we as humanity cannot afford another rollback. We are in super rollbacks just now. What many of us overlook in our times is, first, the human need for connection and ontological security, the heightened potency of feelings of humiliation wherever human rights ideals are salient, and how humiliation entrepreneurs instrumentalize this. That environmental degradation makes business as usual obsolete. The overt and covert persistence of the dominator model of society and how current economic arrangements recreate it. That global infighting is suicidal and we must overcome the security dilemma through global trust building. That the co-creation of global trust and mutual solidarity cannot be bought by money, that it needs time and effort of all of us to be achieved. This is what we still overlook. And since we overlook that, we have these rollbacks. You remember 1948, 1970s, human rights ideals were being embraced. What happened in 1979? The rise of Reagan and Thatcher said, roll back the frontiers of socialism and roll forward the frontiers of freedom. 1970s, the fossil fuel industry learned of the risks of its operations. What happened in 1989? The Global Climate Coalition was founded to downplay and deny those risks. Sorry. You see, I'm too enthusiastic. Then in America,
I think, Evelyn, I think you have a reason to be enthusiastic, and
yes,
perhaps you have a reason to
to
make
make
a
a
break.
pause soon. Yeah, I know. I'm working towards the pause. So in America, we had one person, one vote. 2010, the US Citizens United ruling broadened cooperation's ability to influence elections. In 2018, we had Fridays for Future. In 2024, environmental activism loses momentum. So we have all these rollbacks, and a very important rollback in the definition of what dignity is. Here in the US, I meet people who say, if you don't have money, it means you are lazy and it's your own fault if you have no dignity. Dignity is money. If you don't have money, you have no dignity. Thank you very much. And it's your own fault. So for some people, dignity has become simply another word for individual freedom. This is this freedom, the John Wayne notion of dignity through pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. The problem is that the result of this freedom is freedom for the wolves has often meant death to the sheep, says Isaiah Berlin. So, you see, what I work for is the social body frame of dignity. This is equality in dignity in mutual solidarity, the lying eight. And then you have the social contest frame of dignity. Dignity in that frame means autonomy for equals in competition. And this is a toxic definition of dignity. And at the moment, I see that people all over the world, they are oscillating between these two definitions. So after more than 40 years of rollback, new movements arise now that are carried by feelings of humiliation. And the big question that we have to ask us all now, will these new movements walk the Hitler path out of humiliation, the violent path, the dominator path, or the Mandela path? And here comes the next chapter then. And here I can make a small pause so that everybody can have some water and I can drink my water. Perhaps we can have some kind of 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay. And I leave that on because I don't want you to forget that I will continue in 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Evelyn, for the wonderful presentation. And we are looking forward to hearing more in those 2 minutes. So this is a Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa. And my internet connection is not the best, so sometimes I'm off, sometimes on. Please bear with me. But this is definitely a wonderful presentation. And I've learned many new words, actually. And, like the ecocide, the sociocide, the cogitocide, and I'm sure more are coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yes, beloved community. Thank you so much, Peter.
So, are you ready?
Yes.
I hope nobody has fainted in the meantime.
That was only 1 minute.
Only 1 minute? Peter, you are such a gift in Vermont. A gift from Vermont.
I met Bio Akomolafe last month And he said, when things are speeding up, it's time to slow down.
Yeah.
And he said, if you want to find your way, you have to get lost.
Yes, very good. So, dear friends, I continue. Is that okay?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. So there is the Mandela way out of humiliation, not only the way of violent revenge. And you know that, as I said, if Mandela had done what happened in Rwanda at the same time, asking his black brothers and sisters to take their knives that they have at home and kill their neighbors, perhaps they would have done that. That happened in Rwanda. It was extremely cost effective. Just a radio station saying, if you love the Hutu cause, take your machetes that you have at home and go to your Tutsi neighbors and humiliate them and kill them. So when I studied that, I said, feelings of humiliation are the nuclear bomb of the emotions because nobody had to buy weapons. Everybody had the weapons at home. It was enough with the humiliation narrative. So now, what can we do? What can we do? How can we come from a planet that we are drowning and burning? How can we get to a blue planet? How? And on Monday, I talked with Dr. Youssef Mahmoud, and he is perhaps with us now. It would be lovely. It's very early in the morning here in New York. And on Monday, I had a wonderful conversation with him. And please go to our website. It's 1.5 hours of conversation and listen to it because he has all the right thoughts. He was a UN under Secretary General for many, many years, and he changed his thinking after retirement. And I learned, as you said, George, you said you learned so many new words, and I learned that there is a lot of literature about the politics of being rather than having. And then there is a book about 3 horizons, and all this with compassion. So I really invite everyone to listen to this conversation that I had on Monday, because Dr. Youssef Mahmoud, hailing from Tunisia, is a Mandela. So, and I learned from my father. He became the most loving human being I am ever met, after having gone through multiple humiliations. What he said is, it's not enough to think outside of the box. What is needed is to get out of the box. And in the interconnected world in which we live, that has overstretched its resources, the only way is what I call big love. It's not this kind of blue-eyed falling in love. No, it's satyagraha, Gandhi's notion. It's Ubuntu, the African philosophy. It is love that encompasses all life on earth. Big love, my father would say, can no longer be treated as a naive dream. Big love is no idealism. It is the new realism. For over 70 years, game theorists have studied strategic dilemmas and have consistently shown that dialogue, even if not legally binding, plays a pivotal role in fostering cooperation. We can no longer afford rollbacks. Loving dialogue is the way. Compassion, mutual solidarity. And remember, who said that? Martin Luther King. I have a dream. He wrote a book, Strength to Love. Militarism is a boomerang now in our world. Desmond Tutu gave the foreword to my 3rd book, Gender, Humiliation, and Global Security, because basically it's a book about big love. So we are at the second main transformative moment of our modern human history. And now we face more circumscription, not only that the planet is limited in size, Clean water is limited, clean air is limited, minerals are limited, everything is limited. Okay. And what do? We maximize the adaptation that our ancestors started with 10,000 years ago. We maximize domination, exploitation. We maximize competition for domination. You see this exponential red curve there? This is the curve when you hear in the news that we need economic growth. Economic growth is an exponential curve. And in a limited context, exponential growth is impossible. A tree stops growing. We cannot ask our children when they are 15 to grow eternally. At some point, everything in our context has to stop growing. So this is basically an adaptation that is not possible. So we have to learn mutuality. And we can, as I said, we have everything. We can manifest the fact that we are one family on one tiny planet. We can overcome all the dilemmas, the security dilemma, and then the other dilemmas I will also talk about later. We have all these dilemmas, we can overcome them all. And look here at the Sustainable Development Goals. Look at goal number 8. What do you see there? An exponential curve. If that is not changed, this will undermine all other goals. And, you know, we know how this plays out in Africa. Inside any important philanthropy meeting, for example, I have seen in Africa, you witness heads of state meeting with investment managers and corporate leaders. All are searching for answers with their right hand to problems that others in the room have created with their left hand. This is what we live in today, the world. And George, you know, certainly you know Catherine Odora Hoppers. Howard Richards worked with her, and she is the professor. I worked with her and Howard in South Africa. She was a professor in South Africa at that time. And she says she created this image, and she said, infighting is useless because the crocodile will eat us all. This is Catherine. So I don't read that all. Catherine Odora Hoppers was then the holder of a South African research chair in development education at the University of South Africa. She says the time has come for higher education in Africa to go beyond theories and move promptly towards transformative action. Africa needs intellectuals who are able to see the link between science and citizenship, democracy and epistemology, cognitive justice and peace, and superimpose them on governance issues, and so on and so on. So she is now in Calgary, and she is somebody worth connecting with. So now, the most important thing, as I said, our task to manifest that we are one global village. A village. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes a community to nurture life. And all this is relevant for the global village as much as for the local village, and everyone can and must contribute. So our task is to get away from dominator polities pitted against each other to global partnership. Our task is to overcome the security dilemma. No longer, if you want peace, prepare for war. No, if you want peace, prepare for peace. We can overcome the security dilemma too. No longer, if you want material riches, invest in exploitation. No, globalization of care, trust, and mutual responsibility. No longer the globalization of exploitation. The commons dilemma. The tragedy of the commons was this pivotal article of James Hardin in 1968. he said, an unmanaged commons in a world of limited material wealth and unlimited desires inevitably ends in ruin. And our planet is our commons. It's our commons. And now we see ecocide. What do we have to do? We have to manifest the blessings of the commons to protect the planet as our common wealth. And we have people who say it's not possible. Yes, Elinor Ostrom received the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009 for showing that not just small villages, also bigger groups can protect their commons. Then there is the collective action dilemma. It means a situation where people, despite sharing a common interest, fail to act towards achieving it because everyone waits for others to take the initiative, resulting in collective inaction. And we have that in the world. In Norway or in Germany, they say, oh, if India doesn't do anything against the climate change or to mitigate it, and China is, burning all this coal, then we don't have to do anything. So at the end, nobody does anything. The only solution is simultaneous global systemic action is the way to overcome the collective action dilemma. In that, solidarity is the political version of love. Global solidarity waits to be manifested at the planetary level in all institutional frames. So this is still a good idea. You know, what the idea was when the United Nations were founded. It's still good, the idea. It's still valid. I contend that the security dilemma and all other dilemmas can be left behind collectively by all of us, and this without creating a global dictatorship. This is what people tell me. Evelyn, don't think about it. It's a global dictatorship you are talking about. No. I have dedicated my entire life to help manifest worldwide lasting peace and dignity, peace among ourselves and with our habitat. I see now that my generation has failed. I am personally devastated and am ashamed of my generation. I deeply and sincerely apologize to the generations coming after me. My hope is that today's young people will be able to use the opportunities that are still at hand. Back to the big picture. John Stewart, an evolutionary theorist and activist, core member of the Evolution, Complexity and Cognition Research Group at the Free University of Brussels, he says, just remember evolution. It started with one cell. Then there became more and more cells, and they competed. And they would not have reached the next level of evolution if they had not come together in unity in diversity, like in our bodies. This is one cell, many cells, but they don't compete, they work together in diversity. This is the next level of evolution. And this is the place where we are as humanity. We will not make the next level of evolution if we don't manage to get together as a global family in unity in diversity. This is our task. So what is then dignity? How would I describe dignity? When I'm in a room, I ask another person to stand up and stand in front of me. And I say, and stand and look at me so that we are on one level. So if I respect myself so much and I respect you, we are on the same way, we are on one level. It's not that I push down the other person. We are on one level. And then I say, please give me your hands so that we form a lying eight. This lying eight symbolizes unity in diversity. It's not that I choke the other person, that would be uniformity without diversity. And it's also not that we are in competition. This would be division without unity. So it's unity in diversity, it's non-dualism. We are one and two at the same time. you know, the terminology of a dignitary is that a dignitary is higher in dignity. No, a true dignitary serves their people rather than humiliating underlings. Unity in diversity, connected by the literacy of love. And here you see dancers here in New York manifesting the Lying Eight. And I give talks all around the world. If I'm in a right-wing political context in the US and I use the terminology of communism or socialism, I might be thrown out of the room. If I give a talk in the South, in Chile, and I use the term of capitalism, I might be thrown out of the room. And these are hot button words for cycles of humiliation of the past, I notice, because the people who are getting most angry at me then, they don't know what capitalism, socialism, and communism really means. It's simply high feelings. It's a hot button word for humiliation, for cycles of humiliation of the past. And I do not want to be caught in them. Therefore, I think perhaps we should not no longer need isms. But what if we say dignityism? What about dignityism? What would it mean? What would it mean? And I have created a definition that I will read to you now, okay? I read, don't read it. And we are not so far from the end, so please keep going with me. What dignism means? It means a world where every newborn of all species, be it human or non-human, finds space and is nurtured to unfold their highest and best, embedded in a social context of loving appreciation and connection. A world where the carrying capacity of the planet guides the ways in which all basic needs are met. It's a world of unity in diversity where we take on the responsibility to unite in building mutual trust, where we prevent unity from devolving into oppressive uniformity and keep diversity from devolving into hostile division. It is a world where we unite in respecting every individual's dignity while celebrating their diversity. Dignism means ending cycles of humiliation of the past and preventing new ones from emerging. Dignism means loving care for the common good of all of humanity as co-inhabitants of one single finite habitat. Dignism weaves together all dignifying aspects of all the world's traditions, Ubuntu, remember Ubuntu in Africa, into systems that protect the dignity of all living beings in our global village. So it means we can no longer afford to endlessly cycle through emancipation and rollback. Returning to dignified cooperation, systemically and globally, is now a question of life or death. A culture of lasting peace needs to combine the courageous heroism that during the past millennia was reserved for males in many cultural realms, with the relational care work that was relegated to women in the past. So from glorifying domination to dignified global cooperation, that is our task. My advice, avoid setting in motion cycles of humiliation, be it intentionally or unintentionally, through too casual displays of power, because this humiliates more than before. Humiliation no longer leads to subservient humbleness. As feelings of humiliation become the nuclear weapon of emotions, simple negotiation can hardly undo them. When prevention has been neglected, it is too late for peace. Remove the incentives that make humiliation entrepreneurship a golden path to profit and power. Master the courage to engage in much more complex, relational, multilateral, foresighted, integrative, and holistic strategies than before. These are the very strategies of communal sharing, of relating and caretaking that for a long time have been ascribed to women. Now these strategies need to be practiced by all men and women. Such strategies are no longer optional. They are life-saving and humanizing for all living beings. So this is the end of my talk, and now I will take another hat just to until now, I spoke to you as Evelyn, as a researcher, And you don't have to believe a word I said, okay? So now I take on another hat, the hat of a unifier. Okay, so now I will explain to you the work I do. I bring together a global network of people that is called Human Dignity and Humiliation Study since more than 20 years. It is two things, basically. It's a transdisciplinary academic field. Humiliation studies is an academic field. And as I said, it's a global fellowship of like-minded academics and practitioners. It is, and I'm the global ambassador for that. It is a not-for-profit labor of love, and we are working for a new future for humankind rather than fighting against old structures. We are a small group in the core, and you see Linda Hartling there. You see Arne Næss from Norway. He was one of the founders. And we are 1,000 in the core whom I invited, and about 8,000 people on our address list. And here you see Linda Hartling. She is the one I work with every day. Here she is with her mentor, Jean Baker Miller. And they showed with their relational cultural theory that growth fostering relationships are a central human necessity. Thus they are going beyond Western notions of individualism. And that is at the core of our work. Relationships come first. And with the global dignity work that I do together with Linda and others in our global dignity community, we invite everyone who has resources in form of time, energy, knowledge, or skills, and now I quote Linda, to step into our shared responsibility to co-create and maintain institutions in the global village that protect the common good of all living beings, a responsibility that we all have already, even if we don't acknowledge it. And this is an artificial intelligence image that of that. Our work has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times, and we appreciate Bertha von Suttner's work because she gave Alfred Nobel the idea for this prize. He didn't have this idea. She had the idea. And she wrote the book, Lay Down Your Arms, Die Waffen nieder, already in 1889. And since 2003, we organize 2 conferences per year, one in December in New York, and therefore I'm in New York at the moment. And the coming one is on the 6th of December, so you are all welcome. It's hybrid, you can be there also online. And the second conference each year in a different place. As I said, in 2019 in the Amazon, in 2022 in Amman, on all continents so far. And the next year it will be in Pakistan in end of October. So please come. Here is our conference in 2013 in South Africa. This is South Africa, 2013, our conference in South Africa. And this is, Catherine was there with us. And then we had our 2015 conference in Rwanda. So I'm showing you only the pictures from our African now, since you are in Tanzania. These were our African conferences. We also had one in Egypt in 2018. And here, the last one before COVID was in the Amazon, just when the forest had been put on fire. And I gave a talk in the parliament of the Amazon state of Pará and said, you are basically the victims of double or triple humiliation. This was the last New York meeting before COVID. Then came COVID. And then 2022, in Amman, you see Prince Hassan bin Talal, a Mandela personality in the middle. Now in September, we had our conference in Madrid. And now in next December 6th, a teacher's college in Columbia University. Please come, it's hybrid. You can also participate online. In 2011, we launched the World Dignity University Initiative. It is an invitation to you to help form a global community of educators and learners for whom dignity is central. We have founded Dignity Press. It's also a not-for-profit publishing house. So far, published 30 books from our network, and we are now looking for a new director, because the Uli Spalthoff, he gave 10 years of his life, and he is getting tired now, and we thank him to build up, single-handedly, he built up Dignity Press for us. You see, these are my books so far, and you know, our entire network is based on gift economy, and I give my life as a gift, and I give all what I do as a gift. So all my books I will give to you as a gift, as PDF files, if you write me an email. All people in our network who have a bigger house or apartment, we invite them to declare their home to be a dignity dialogue home for our network. And this is my global home. I go from home to home to home. I would like to end this with this call. If we want the global village to become a place of dignity in the future, its citizens need to join hands and combine the best of all traditions. Remember Ubuntu, including traditional male and female role descriptions. In my personal life, I strive to manifest the communal sharing practiced by indigenous people and bring together the virtues that are usually ascribed to femaleness, as there is, for example, sensitivity, softness, tenderness, and care. I try to combine that with the virtues that are typically associated with maleness, such as force, strength, braveness, and courage. I think we can all combine all that, all of us. I invite everyone to lovingly engage in long-term strategic thinking for the common good of all living beings on this planet, as everyone can benefit from co-creating a less damaging world system. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Evelyn, for this wonderful presentation. And I thank everybody also for being here. And I'm sure that we would like to continue this conversation. And I've got now one suggestion. Since we are coming close to the end of the year, in fact, next week we have our last webinar for this calendar year, where actually another Evelyn, that's Evelyn Voigt from Canada, will be talking to us about Peace Professionalism Project for the first 90 minutes, as we usually do. Then we'll have time for this beloved community to exchange. I don't know whether Evelyn, Lindner, you might be available next week, you know. We would like to share. In fact, we'd like to also to get to know one another, ask questions, discuss, not a formal presentation, but some sort of get together. So you also, of course, invited to invite your friends and colleagues. And so next week we'll have a webinar as always. And then after the webinar, then we will have a conversation of this from this beloved community. I don't know what you think about it. I will also write to you about it later. I saw one hand. I don't know if somebody wanted to say something, maybe a thank you from one of the participants on behalf of this community.
George, did I see
yes,
a note?
Please.
Did I see a note that Catherine is here in the meeting?
Yes, Catherine is there. Yeah.
I'd like to hear from her.
Yes. My dear sister.
Yay!
Unmute.
It is 6 o'clock here in Calgary, and
Wow.
it is snowing like hell. Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to see you, Catherine, again.
Exactly.
Yeah, indeed. Also, Yusuf Mahmoud was also here, and I mean, we'd like to get to know one another and introduce everyone who is here. And so I'm proposing that next week, next Wednesday, if you can, please join us and let's get to know one another more. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we coming to the end of the presentation already, or can I say
yes,
something?
if you have got a comment or question, please, you may ask it.
Okay. No, it is not a question. It is an observation. You know, I tell you, you know, the awareness building. We have to take it very seriously, actually, because we have got very little time. You know, if we breathe, I'm breathing now. What do we think of life? Because we have to make a choice right here and now. You are either breathing humiliation or you are taking Evelyn's route. And we have to make that public. You get me? So if we don't just mutter it in our toilets, but we make it part of our daily lives, we will transform the world in our various ways, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Dasu, maybe Dasu will be the last person to comment today. Of course, Evelyn, you can also say just one final sentence, and then we close. Thank you so much indeed. Dasu, please.
Okay, thank you, George. I had two questions, but I think you're running short of time. Then I'll ask only one question to Evelyn. I would like to get comment from Evelyn. How does she think that the world can maintain peace? And here I'm talking about the victims, especially in an environment whereby the most powerful global elites, I mean the neocons, are almost on rampage, instigating wars in every corner of the world. How can we achieve peace in such kind of precarious situation? Thank you.
Oh yeah, that is my entire talk, basically. You know, this is the second horizon that Dr. Yusuf Mahmoud described. And I really would like to encourage you to watch the interview that I carried out with him, and I put the link in the chat. And you know, do we have record? Can I save the chat, because I see there are so many wonderful messages, and I would like to read them. I didn't have time to read them. I hope I can get these messages to read later when the recording is saved.
I will send it.
Very good. Oh, good. I put the link to the conversation that I had on Monday with Dr. Yusuf Mahmoud in the chat. And he is really very experienced globally. And he is from Tunisia. And basically, how to make peace, it's global solidarity, and to engage in it all day. I could speak another week about that, how to do it in practice. But I think we don't have the time now. But I recommend already this conversation there. It's a work that every one of us can do every day.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much indeed, Evelyn. And so would you like to say one more thing?
I'm deeply, deeply touched by your invitation. And George, I thank you so much for this initiative that you host one talk every week. This is a huge achievement, a lot of planning. I know how difficult it is. So I'm extremely thankful to you that you do that. And also, I must say, it's deeply touching for me to see dear friends, my dear sister Catherine, my dear brother Peter, my dear brother Niels from Tromsø in the north of Norway, my new friend Olaf, and many other people I know, and Lester. I'm so happy to see you. So I'm simply absolutely touched, deeply touched, and deeply thankful.
Wow, thank you so much indeed. And I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Thank you and goodbye.
Here is said that somebody wants Evelyn's email.
Yes, you can send it, George, perhaps. It's perhaps now people are already leaving.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I will send it. I will send
you.
it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's Evelin Lindner at gmail.com.